Hello and welcome to today's workshop, Mindfulness Feedback and How to Learn from Critique with Pathfinder. This workshop is brought to you by Pathfinder, and Pathfinder is an extracurricular program for incoming first and second years at Northeastern. We provide a safe and inclusive space for students to discuss and pursue their passions. On our website, you can find the Pathfinder applications for first and second year students, applications for moderators, which are open to third, fourth, and fifth year students, as well as recent alumni, and more information about the program and our resources. We have some more workshops coming up, and you can check out our YouTube channel and podcast for our past workshops. And now I will pass it over to Catherine.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to host this workshop. My name is Catherine. I'm a co-program manager here at Pathfinder. I'm also a design student at Northeastern. So I'm approaching my last year of design school. So I've been in countless critiques and countless design courses, which I've absolutely loved, but I've also had to deal with a lot of anxiety around getting feedback and showing my work, because I feel like I'm a very sensitive kind of person, and I put a lot of effort and a lot of myself into my work, as I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. So today's workshop is going to be about what a critique is and how it can be relevant to really any discipline and any kind of job or career, what the psychology is behind giving and receiving feedback, and how you can grow and learn from your peers and really take that feedback and grow from it. And we're going to start with what is a critique. So it is basically a feedback session on a piece of work, whether it's in progress or completed. And we critique because that feedback is really crucial in building your project. You want to get new ideas, you want unbiased feedback, unbiased reactions, and new opinions about your work. And like I said, a critique is not only for designers. It is really common in design school, but if you're in another discipline, you definitely will still experience feedback and criticism, whether or not it's formal or if it's just casual. For example, when I was working at Fidelity, I worked with a lot of program developers and business analysts and stuff like that. So we all had to do critiques for each other and work together as an interdisciplinary team, and they had to critique my work. I had to critique their work, even though we weren't experts, but it really helped us improve our projects. And you can also make these informal. You can just ask your team, what do you think? And you can just kind of ask what their initial reactions are, because this can be really helpful. If it's completely different from what your intentions were, then you have to adjust something. So I just want to go quickly through like how you set up a critique. You usually just want to have a piece of work ready to talk about, whether that's printed out or on your laptop. It can just be working files that you share your screen. And you should usually give like a brief introduction of what your project is, just so that they have an idea of the parameters, especially if they're pretty unfamiliar with you and your work. And then it's good to have a few questions prepared if you're presenting, just to help guide the conversation. And this can really help make sure that you get answers that are important to you. If you come in and just say, here is what I have and let me know what you have, that's perfectly valid. But if you have a few specific questions, then you're definitely going to get specific feedback, which can be super helpful. And then in terms of class versus workplace, in my experience, critiques in a classroom setting are 10 to 15 students, class size, and everyone is expected to present their work, usually in one class period, sometimes in two. And it's usually, if it's a print media class, you print out your work, you post it to the wall. If it's more of a digital class, you usually project it onto the screen, or you'll send files around and people will write their feedback down. So it definitely depends. And then the workplace, in my experience so far, I'm still a student, so this could change, but I've found that it's a little more casual because you kind of present it with people who are really familiar with your project. They're kind of all working on the same thing as well. And then it's also important to remember that remote versus in-person critique can be a big difference. So obviously remote, you will screen share typically, or you'll send files beforehand and then discuss after. But in person, it's a little more, I don't know. I kind of prefer in person because you can point at things specifically. You can Sketch, you can move things around, and it's just a little bit more seamless. Whereas if you're remote, you can use like screen annotations and things like that, but it's just a little bit more tough, especially if you're dealing with something visual. I want to talk about your mindset as the presenter, because it's really scary to present your work. It can feel really vulnerable, because if you really love what you do and if you're really passionate, then anything negative about what you've done is going to hurt, and you're going to take it personally because it's so personal to you. It's your being in work. So I want to talk about growth mindset. This is something that has really helped me take a little bit of the personal aspect out of my work. So what growth mindset is a concept developed by Carol Dweck. She is a Stanford psychologist, and basically it defines individuals who believe that their talents can be developed through hard work, good strategies, and input from others. So the opposite of a growth mindset, the extreme opposite, is a fixed mindset, where someone believes their skills are innate gifts and that they're like fixed and they can't change in any meaningful way based on feedback, and that their success is defined by avoiding any negative feedback. So having a fixed mindset during a critique means that you're only looking for good feedback, and you're looking for praise and approval, and anything that isn't praise will hurt really bad. It will basically invalidate any of your skills that you believe that you have and will have forever, instead of believing that you can gain new skills from that feedback. Pros of having a growth mindset during criticism is that you can get better. If you're using a fixed mindset, a lot of times you're maybe denying that you can get better from feedback. And if you are using a growth mindset, then you're less afraid to ask the tough questions and to dig a little deeper and use feedback to help you grow. So just as important as having a good mindset as the presenter is having a good mindset as the viewer, as the person giving advice and criticism. As the viewer, you are in charge of giving helpful feedback. And my favorite way to give feedback is through the give method. So this is a concept from dialectical behavioral therapy, developed by Marshall Lenehan. So it stands for gentle, interested, validate, and easygoing. And this concept is mostly used for like maintaining relationships, just in general, not necessarily academic or professional. But when you use this in your critiques, then you are really able to be super gentle and not be brutally honest, which we'll talk about in a second, which can be really problematic. So yes, definitely use this. But the reason why you need to use this is because if you don't, it can often make the presenter feel a lot of shame, because they're getting maybe some tough feedback and they're not getting it in a gentle, easygoing manner. So they're gonna feel upset. And shame always prevents learning. So this goes directly against growth mindset. So I know this is all a little bit complicated, but it all connects in like a really interesting way. So I studied Dr. Shauna Shapiro, who has an amazing TED Talk about shame and learning. And she said, quote, "If we have this mistaken belief that if we shame ourselves, if we beat ourselves up, we'll somehow improve. And yet shame doesn't work. Shame never works. It can't work. Literally, psychologically, it can't work, because when we feel shame, the centers of the brain that have to do with growth and learning shut down. When we feel shame, we shut down our learning centers, and we won't learn. And so any feedback that you are giving that makes someone feel ashamed will not resonate with them and will not make them get better. So what's the point of giving that feedback, in my opinion? So yeah, always remember give, because if you give feedback in a way that is gentle, interested, validating, and easygoing, then your feedback will actually resonate with the presenter and will make them better. I've been talking a lot about these different strategies of how to give and receive feedback. There's a really interesting way that you can use vocabulary and evidence-based observation to actually make feedback, because the give and the growth mindset is always to interpret feedback, but how do you actually say feedback? Like, how do you actually come up with feedback? So I really like the visual thinking strategies. And this is all based on a nonprofit that provides training and education to schools and companies. So they're a really cool organization. But what they do is they came up with these 3 questions. What's going on in the image? What do you see that makes you say that? And what more can we find? This is a really cool way to look at a piece of work, obviously a visual piece of work, but it could also be theoretical or ideological. So if you are asking these questions about, say, a classmate's work, then you are purely basing your observations on evidence that you can reference in the image. So we're going to do a very brief practice with these questions. So this is a piece of artwork from 1964 by Robert Rauschenberg. And if we were to do a visual thinking workshop, again, I'm not associated with VTS, but I have done a workshop with them before. So this is not official or anything, but it's just a little introduction into it. But the moderator would ask, what's going on in this image? And that could be a professor or a supervisor, a boss or something. And so like an example of a student answering could say like, I see a collage. And then the professor would say, what do you see that makes you say that? So then you have to provide evidence of a collage. So you might say the images look like photos. They're very realistic, very accurate looking photos. There are clear borders between each image, and then they all look like they're from different locations, different subject matters. So they look like found objects that are pasted together. So that's proof that it is a collage. And the way that this can be useful in feedback is, say the artist did not want this to look like a collage, which, spoiler, they did. This is supposed to be a collage, but if they didn't want it to be a collage, then it would be important feedback to hear that, you know, these borders make it look like a collage. So they would just smooth out the borders, or, you know, make the colors more similar, something like that. And that's really helpful feedback. And it's based on the image and based on evidence. It's not personal. It separates the artist from the artwork, and there's like direct evidence. No one can really dispute that. It's not biased and it's not subjective. So this is something I really recommend looking into if you're ever interested in either just observing art. You can do this if you're at a museum. It's a really fun way to observe art, because you can just look at artwork, and this is a great way to guide your observations and guide your thoughts and ideas. And then the last thing I want to talk about is actually implementing changes based on the feedback and having active listening. So feedback is a privilege, and so thinking about it like this makes you value it even more. If you think about it as kind of a burden, then it's going to feel like a burden, and it's going to feel like it's going to hurt. And it's going to feel like you need to defend yourself. But really, it's just a privilege, and it's a really valuable tool to make yourself better. That being said, it's also important to trust yourself, because not all feedback necessarily needs to be implemented in your work. So if you don't agree with someone's feedback, that's okay, and you don't have to change it. It's still your work, it's still your project. So make sure that you trust your gut. And all of these examples that I'm giving are kind of the extremes, like growth mindset and fixed mindset are kind of the extremes. It's okay to be somewhere in the middle, as long as you're mindful that there is an extreme and that you're not too far into the fixed mindset. So it's okay to acknowledge your strengths and acknowledge your skills. And then in terms of like actually observing all the information, it can be really overwhelming. So I recommend taking notes, just jotting down a word or two, or circling a spot in your project that needs work. And even just like a simple word can really help you go back and actually make changes. If you just kind of sit there and listen, it can be really overwhelming. And afterwards, it's really easy to forget everything that has been said to you. So writing things down is really handy. And it's also cool to write things down that are positive. You don't only just have to write down the negative or the constructive, because some of my favorite memories are of positive feedback on my work. And it's been stuff that I've written down, and it makes me feel proud, it makes me feel happy, and it validates me. So I think there's no harm in just jotting down, like, if someone compliments your work. Just make sure you don't stop there. Make sure you're also balancing that out with next steps that you can take. And then finally, once you've listened to your critique, you've taken notes, you should reevaluate your notes the next day, and write down your action steps. So this is something that we work on in Pathfinder all the time, is our action steps. Because if you have a goal, you have to make sure that you break down your goal into smaller steps that are measurable and attainable. So writing down these small chunks in a list is really great. So if we go back to our collage example, if you wanted to make this not look like a collage, there could be some smaller steps that you take. And if you put this in a schedule, it's really manageable, and it actually is pretty satisfying to see all those steps played out, and then of course your final product. So I hope that this has been helpful in terms of how to set up a critique, how to receive feedback, and then also how to give feedback, and then also how to use it, because it is really scary. So here are all my sources, and I will definitely share these in the description, because they are really helpful sources to look back on and keep just in the back of your mind if you ever need them, because it is really easy when you're in school to get wrapped up in bad feedback, or like a critique that just like pulls you down. And that's okay, it happens, but remember that it's there to help you, and hopefully you allow it to help you by using these different mindfulness skills. So yeah, thank you for having me for this quick workshop.
Awesome. I think this is such a good topic to have too, because critiques and like things of that nature, you're kind of just thrown into in college and never given like any direction of how they go. So like, I love that we covered this topic. I'm just going to ask you one of our classic Pathfinder questions. Can you tell us about like your first year, if you came in with the major that you're still with now, things that you wish you had known your first year, stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. I came as a design major my first year. I didn't have a concentration in mind. So I guess that means I did stay within the same major. Let's see. I feel like I always knew what I wanted to do, like career-wise. So I got really lucky in that sense, that I always really wanted to be a designer. However, I remember like in my first design concept class, like just being blown away by how important the small things are in design. I was kind of like coming out of high school, I just thought I was really good at everything in terms of like designing. But I didn't realize like how important typography is, and how you can't just like download, well, you can, but you shouldn't download type from the internet, and you shouldn't mess with type in certain way. Like, I feel like typography has really changed my perception of design, because it is so deeply rooted in history, and it's so meaningful, more than just seeing words on a page. So I came in and I was like, yeah, I know how typography works. I know how color and form and digital design work. But I mean, it's just, I don't want to invalidate those feelings at the beginning of my career, but it just makes me really proud to see how far I've come. Um, so my biggest advice, I think, would be try not to try not to be mean to your past self who thought they knew everything and thought they knew what was going to happen and what was going on, because I there's no point in being mean to them. But also just try and notice your future self and your current self and how much you've grown and how much you've changed, because like literally after every single class I'm like, wow, I feel like a different person, or I feel like I've learned a totally new way of working, and that's the whole point of college to me. So like there's no point in being mean to your past self who like thought they knew everything, because yeah, whatever. That's the point of going to school, and that's great if that's like your outcome. So um yeah, I don't have much experience like changing my major or anything like that. But I do know even if you stay within the same major, you're gonna have go through like major like mindset changes, and it's gonna be hard.
That's definitely great advice. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for hosting this workshop. We're very glad to have it in this Pathfinder on-demand repertoire, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Pathfinder meets every week for roundtable discussions. We also meet weekly for workshops just like this one. So check out our Google Calendar and join in next time.